Hey y'all, Martin here in the studio today, and I'm making my boiled cider rye bread. This unique, delicious loaf is fun to make. If you've never made rye, come along for the recipe. It's in the link below, right down there in the recipe. So, like almost all good hearth breads, this recipe begins with a pre-ferment, and in this case, we're gonna make it with the rye flour, right? Because that's the only type of flour that we're gonna use in this recipe is rye. This is a medium rye. It's been sifted to remove just a little bit of the bran. It still has a ton of mineral content, and it still has a ton of fiber as well. But I'm gonna start in here with some water. I'm just using room temperature water because this is gonna rise for 12 hours, 16 hours, could even go longer than that. The other thing is that I'm gonna use a little bit of sourdough culture in here, right? And for the baker's math people out there, I'm adding it at about 10% of my flour weight. And in this pre-ferment, I'm using equal parts flour and water, right? Sometimes with rye flours, you'll go a little bit stiffer than that, but I have found that this is a great consistency for this bread. So the pre-ferment is used primarily for flavor, but in the case of rye, it's also used for some functional characteristics. As this ferments, it gains a little bit of acidity, and in that process, that slightly more acidic environment, it helps to actually strengthen the rye flour. It also does some other things, and most importantly, it supports a great shelf life. So, great keeping qualities, great flavor, great nutritional benefits. Rye bread, y'all, come on. Get on board. So this comes together. I've never mixed cement, but I kind of make up that that's what it looks like, right? It's just this sort of like Play-Doh-y, sort of clay-like consistency. So that looks good. It's homogeneous. That's really all we want. We're not developing any strength or anything like that. Snap your lid on and set it in a nice, comfortable place to rise. 12 to 16 hours, we'll come back and we'll make some beautiful bread with this delicious starter. So we've got our pre-ferment. It rose overnight. It's acidic, smells like fresh cut grass to me, real bright, beautiful. And all of that flavor is gonna go into the bowl. Now listen, as we work with this dough, one of the things that I wanna talk about the most is actually the differences between how rye doughs handle and how a wheat dough might handle. I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, is that they think that a rye dough should sort of be stretchy and elastic as a wheat dough might, but it's totally different. It's completely different. Rye doesn't have that sort of rubber band consistency that a wheat dough will have. And so because of that, if you touch it, your hands get stuck. It's messy. It's a little bit of a pain. And so to get around that, you'll see me using the spatulas a lot, the flexible bowl scraper a lot. So I'll get my water in, and then I'm just gonna mix with my hand to combine, to just sort of agitate it and make sure that the culture is fully distributed into the water, right? And yes, you could do this with your scraper, you could do it with a whisk if you wanted. The truth is that I like this. I like the way that this actually feels, so it's a little indulgence for me. It's one of the joys of baking, is actually getting your hands in there and actually doing something right. Just get that in, clean my hands up. So let's get this flour in, but before I get that in there, I want to just sort of like reassure you that this is how this should look. And as I look at the reviews of this recipe online, I can see that at points people are struggling with the ways which rye is different than wheat. And so what I would say to that is just follow along here, make sure that you're using some tools that will help you sort of keep your hands out of this mix. It's more like a batter bread. Approach it like that and you'll find it much easier to deal with. I'm gonna get the rye flour in, and today I'm using medium rye. If you've never made rye bread before, or if you've made a little bit, you may see where rye is often not used at 100%. Usually it's used at maybe 10 or 20 or even 30%. This is 100% rye flour. In doing that, we get more and more flavor. It also increases the challenge of working with it a little bit, or it forces us to treat it a little bit differently. Whereas when we go to 100%, there's just no messing around. 544 grams of this medium rye flour. If you don't have medium rye and the only rye flour that you have in your house is whole rye, this recipe does work fine with whole rye as well. So let's get this boiled cider in. This is a product that's made down the road from us here by the Woods family, And basically what they do is they have a sugar making operation, a maple syrup operation, right? And so in the fall, they switch over to boiling cider and reducing it from their apple orchard. So in writing this recipe, I was looking for a way to use this, and there's a long history of making rye breads with a little bit of something that's both tart and sweet in it. If you don't have boiled cider, there are instructions on the recipe, and basically you can just take regular, very good cider and just reduce it down, and there are good instructions for that. Even though we're using a sourdough pre-ferment and it's already in there, I'm using a little bit of yeast to also encourage fermentation. Having a little bit of yeast helps these rise times to be a little bit shorter because the loaf can be prone to collapse, if that makes sense. So a little bit of yeast just to encourage fermentation. So the salt is 17 grams. We'll get that in there. And then I'll move some things and we'll go to mixing. Using my spatula here, I'm just gonna start stirring to combine. And rye is one of those things, it's like people are sort of coming around to using it as part of their baking life. So rye chocolate chip cookies, rye brownies, rye tortillas, all kinds of uses of rye. We're basically at the end of mix, and I haven't really done much with my hands, right? I'm gonna show you why I haven't had my hands in there. I'm gonna put them in there and mess my hands up just for you. Remember how I said that rye doesn't form that sort of elastic matrix in the same way that wheat-based doughs do. So while this looks beautiful on the outside, if I try and stretch it as though I had just mixed together a loaf of sourdough bread or a pan bread or something like that, you can see that it doesn't do anything. It's like clay. It literally has no what we call elasticity. It doesn't snap back when I pull on it. Because of that, when people touch it, oftentimes they're like, ugh, I tried to knead that and it didn't work. This recipe is terrible. Martin doesn't know what he's talking about. While all of that may be true, the fact is that rye deserves different expectations, right? Rye is a different beast altogether. And so just remember that as you get your hands in there. Anytime you're working with sticky doughs is to keep your hand wet. If you keep your hand wet, you just won't end up with anything on it. Okay, so we're gonna cover this and we're gonna put it in a nice warm place to rise for an hour or so. Now, one thing about this is that we wanna guide fermentation, right? So take the time to think through, like, where should I put this dough? Put it in a place where the dough will feel coddled and supported and held. Let the dough know that you're thinking about it. So 75 degrees, somewhere in that range, even if it's up to 80 degrees, that's okay too. So an hour in a place that's nice and comfy. We'll be back to divide and shape these loaves. Okay, so the dough's rested for about an hour. Come in here and look at this dough. It's beautiful. You can see some pinprick bubbles on the top surface. It's slightly puffy, but you know, it's not going to sort of double in size and lighten like you would expect from a wheat-based dough. It's just gonna sort of inflate itself slightly, and you can feel that if you touch the surface gently, you'll feel that slight marshmallowy quality. So, a couple things. First, what I wanna do is actually just get my baskets ready, right? There is no like divide, pre-shape, and final shape. This is gonna be just divide, final shape straight into the baskets. So have your baskets ready. I've got a fine mesh sieve right here, a nice little strainer. I've got my flour in there, and I'm gonna apply a thorough but light coating to the basket liner. And you know, you don't have to be too fussy here beyond just the quantity of flour. That's the main thing that I want. And the reason for that is I want the loaves to come out of the basket after the proof really well, and also I want to have that surface which after I score it and after they're baked has a great contrast between the lighter flour and the darker cuts where I release the loaf. Okay, set your baskets aside, get them out of the way, and then we're gonna divide. In order to divide, I'm gonna put a little bit of flour on top of the loaf. That way when it gets onto the work surface here, it's not going to adhere. As I keep saying, it's sticky stuff, so we wanna sort of guard against getting our hands stuck in this sort of batter. And then, as always, you see me do this 1,000 times, right? Just release the loaf a little bit, and it'll come out a little bit more easily. You know, like I said, this dough hasn't risen as much as you might expect from a wheat-based dough, right? But it does still have some structure, and we can look at that actually. If you remember back to the pre-ferment, this is very similar to that, right? So a little bit more flour on top, and as always, you know, Not a real heavy layer. It's just enough to keep my bench tool from sticking to the dough proper, okay? I look at it with my eyes and I sort of subdivide it into two, getting as close as I can, and then I'm gonna check. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, just under 800 grams. Plus or minus 5 grams, y'all. Don't be too uptight about getting it to the gram exactly in this case. With your salt and other fine measurements, yes, be very precise. Loaf weights, plus or minus 5 grams, you're good. I'm gonna shape this loaf. Let me show you what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna pat it a little bit, and then almost like you're performing a bowl fold, I'm just coming up from the outside and pressing to the middle, and you're gonna see that as I do that, the dough just tears. It's not stretchy. You can't sort of add any tension here. We're not tensioning the loaf so much as we're just gathering it into a form which is somewhat round. I'm not even really degassing it. I've got my nice round loaf here. It's good. I'm gonna turn it over and I'm gonna show you the underside, which is the smooth side, and that's gonna be the side that we eventually score. It will become the top side of the loaf, okay? So let me turn it over, and it's beautiful, it's smooth, and all I have to do now is just plop that into the basket. Okay, let's do that one more time. We're gonna let that rise for about 30 minutes covered, and then we're gonna turn it out and score it. Where do we put it while it waits? Well, I'm gonna put it in a nice warm spot, somewhere near the oven maybe, or if you have another spot in your house that stays nice and comfortable for bread, that's the place you wanna be. So, we've given our loaves a mere 30 minutes of final rise. So, pretty quick, and I think that's kind of nice. It allows you to get stuff into the oven more quickly than you might with some other types of bread. So what am I looking for? What I'm looking for is something that's completely different than you would expect from a traditional wheat-based dough. Again, as with bulk fermentation, I'm just looking for a slight puff to it. You might see some pinprick bubbles on the surface. When I press it, I'll feel that it yields, but only slightly. It's only had 30 minutes. I mean, what could happen, right? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna invert it onto my parchment here. The parchment's gonna help me get it into the oven more easily, right? And then I'm gonna use my lom and I'm gonna score it. But there's also another option. I could invert it and then let it crack and naturally sort of score itself. That's another beautiful way to do it. Both are delicious. I just wanted to show you the lom because not a lot of people have seen scoring with a 100% rye bread. So I'm gonna turn it out. You could dump it directly onto the parchment, or you could put it into your hand. It's relatively firm and it can take that. And as with everything else, you kind of wanna sort of distribute them so that they have as much space around them as possible. Now, with a nice sharp lom, I'm gonna score them. And how we score them is really sort of baker's choice. I'm gonna keep it simple today, and I'm gonna do just a checkerboard. So I'm gonna make maybe 5 cuts across the surface, and then at a right angle to those cuts, I'm gonna make another series of cuts. They don't look like much, but as they hit the oven and as we steam them, they will have a small burst of activity and they will rise and sort of open up into those cuts. So beautiful loaves, we're gonna load them. I'm gonna add some steam. We'll get that door closed quickly and then we'll give them a nice full bake. The Rye Bread Parade coming to town. Choo-choo! Look at these loaves. The color between the cracks of this bread is like my favorite color in the world. It's black, it's brown, it's chestnut, it's beautiful. Good news for us, good news for me is that I have some loaves here that have cooled and we can go ahead and cut them open. So let's taste it. It's tangy, just a little bit tangy. And you know what's funny is that as the bread sort of ages over the course of days and even up to a week or so, it continues to develop a little bit more acidity. Right now it's pretty gentle and it's balanced by the sweetness. As it ages, it gets a little bit more acidity and develops more flavor in my opinion. This is our boiled cider rye bread. Y'all, it's a perfect bread for the cold months when you need strong flavors and things that warm your belly and your heart. Make some of this bread, share it with your friends and neighbors. This is Martin in the studio saying thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. Happy baking.